for being here. It's wonderful to see everyone in this room. My name is Aisha Gomez. I am a state rep from South Minneapolis, District 62A, South Side, and was really honored to serve as the chair of the Preventing Homelessness Division during the last biennium. And so we're here today to talk about finishing the unfinished business that so many of you in this room contributed to that came out of the Preventing Homelessness Division. This is unfinished business for our state. And we know that, you know, people who have been in emergency shelter response and homelessness response over the last few years in our state have done incredible work with not enough resources during a time that was filled with uncertainty and terror, really, for what might happen. And so I just want to acknowledge at the forefront, you know, I want to acknowledge that work of the many people in this room who care for our unsheltered communities and all across the state. This work is here before us because of you, because of the providers that came, and most importantly of all, because of the directly impacted people who came in front of the Preventing Homelessness Division and shared their personal stories, and shared with our members and shared with the legislature the situation and what it's like and how people are living out here. And so we thank you deeply for being here. We thank you for being with us on this journey over the last couple of years. And you know, our intention, as I said, is to finish that business, is to get the support out to all corners of our state that we need, and to help people in our communities who are struggling and who need a hand. And so we thank you for joining us in that work. So first up, Rhonda Ottison's going to join us and she'll be our MC. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. I'm Rhonda Ottison, Executive Director of the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, and we work with partners, organizations, and people with lived experience all across the state to end homelessness. I wanted to provide a few statistics about homelessness from the Wilder Homeless Study and the statewide homelessness management information system to ground our conversation here today. On any given night, there are about 20,000 people here in Minnesota who are experiencing homelessness, and 50,000 people will experience homelessness over the course of this year. The last Wilder study saw a significant increase in the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and that was 62% increase. We have significant overrepresentation of our BIPOC and LGBTQ populations in homelessness, and homelessness is a crisis of public health. Many of you probably saw the Minnesota Department of Health mortality study that came out over the past couple of weeks. 20-year-olds here in Minnesota who are experiencing homelessness have the same rate of death as 50-year-olds in the general population. So to address this unsheltered and homelessness crisis, we are returning to the legislature for the 4th year to ask for investments into our shelter system. So I'm going to focus on the shelter capital needed. Right now, there are 86 projects across our state that would create or enhance 3,500 shelter spaces that are ready to be funded with a funding gap of almost $200 million. The Wilder study tells us that 77% of adults have experienced homelessness multiple times here in Minnesota, and the Pathway Home Act will move us closer to homelessness being brief, rare, and non-recurring. These investments will support the needed shelter models. They include culturally responsive shelters, shelters that improve accessibility and sensory needs, domestic violence shelters, youth shelters, and gender-affirming shelters. We need shelter spaces here in Minnesota that are safe and designed to meet the specific needs of the shelter guests they are serving. And next, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Beth Holger from the LINC and the Youth Services Network.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, and a special thank you to Senator Dibble, Representatives Keeler, Gomez. Words cannot express our gratitude for your leadership on these important issues. My name is Beth Holger. I am the CEO of a youth and adult-led nonprofit called the LINC. We provide street outreach, shelter, and housing programs to young people experiencing homelessness, along with young families, for victims of sex trafficking and youth that are involved in the juvenile justice / non-justice system and foster care. I also am here representing, and honored to be here today, to represent the Movement to End Youth Homelessness and the Youth Services Network, which is a statewide coalition of homeless youth serving agencies who do incredible work. On any given night in our state, there are 4,872 unaccompanied young people experiencing homelessness. These are our Minnesota youth who are sleeping in the entryways to buildings, living out of cars, encampments, abandoned buildings, or exchanging or forced to exchange sex for a place to stay. They are going through horrible rates of violence, abuse, and trauma that no human being should ever have to endure at any age. It is time to do the right thing for these youth. They are incredible, they are resilient, they are smart, hardworking young people who deserve to be safe, housed, cared for, and empowered to accomplish the great goals they have for themselves. We can end youth homelessness. We have the data. We have the incredible network of youth providers across the state, and we know exactly how we can end youth homelessness through investing in our state's Homeless Youth Act. The Homeless Youth Act is a law that was written and advocated for over 20 plus years and will keep coming back until we end youth homelessness in our state. It was written by us frontline providers and youth with lived experience. We just need you to hear us and for the state elected officials to make the right decisions now that we have the resources. There's no excuse. I am calling on all of our state leaders today to join the movement to end youth homelessness and all homelessness and to make the right decisions with our budget surplus by fully funding the Pathways Home Act, the Homeless Youth Act, and Safe Harbor. Thank you so much. We don't have any time to wait. This is a life and death decision to make, and we need to make it sooner than later. Thank you very much. And with that, I want to pass it on to Claudette. Thank you for being here, Claudette.
Hello, my name is Claudette Vidal, and I became homeless in 2014 due to losing my job and exhausting all my savings trying to keep my apartment. I grew up in Jamaica and came to the United States in 1999 and was shocked to learn that so many people are homeless here because it's a rich country. Other countries don't have all the opportunities that we do here, yet homelessness doesn't exist in Jamaica. When I became homeless, it took a long time to get into shelter due to the hours that the shelters were open, and the shelters are always full. Once in the shelter, it was a shared room with 6 people. Can you imagine that? 6 people. You have to use the bathroom, you have to sign up to use the showers, you have to sign up to get meals. And you have to leave the shelter by 8 a.m. with all of your belongings. I didn't feel safe there, but I persisted because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I eventually got connected to Project for Pride in Living, and I've been housed now for the past 8 years. During that time, I got my information technology certifications through Cisco and CompTIA and graduated with honors. If we pass the Pathways Home Act, we could create new shelter spaces that offer safety and privacy, preserve and improve existing shelters, and provide adequate staff. That's important, adequate staff support within the shelters to make it a better experience for people that need to stay there. My experience staying in a shelter was traumatic, but if people in the shelter are struggling with their mental health, addiction, and older disabilities were able to get the right services and support, my experience likely would have been better. I never want to be homeless again, but I want to use my experience to change the system and make things better for other people. Shelter saves lives and housing ends homelessness, which is why I'm here today to express my support for passing the Pathways Home Act quickly. I also want to thank the legislators here for the leadership in making this possible. Thank you. Now I pass it on to Michael Gore.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Claudette, for sharing your story. My name is Michael Gore. I'm the president and CEO of Catholic Charities Twin Cities. Unfortunately, I'm here to talk about really despair in our community, especially the work that we're engaged in now and discussion we're having today. In any given year, we serve over 20,000 folks who are faced with homelessness. Out of 20,000, 10,000 folks that we serve in our 4 of our shelters. Shelters that consist of young people, families, and a single adult. And I'm asking our leaders in our community to make appropriate investment in this particular space. I think we need to better understand what is shelter and what services that we provide. Shelter is a place where you can sleep overnight, out of elements, out of cold weather, where they would provide hot meals, shower, some basic needs. We're not talking about hotel stay. We're talking basic stuff, right? So we're serving, in our organization alone, serve over 10,000 folks. It is really about equity and race and justice and social justice issue. For me as a leader of our community, serving this many people, it saddens me here today that we're once again talking about this issue, seeking support. But there are many great leaders here today. They are behind me and beside me who are pushing for this legislation. We need funding today. In Catholic Charities, our funding consists of less than 5% coming from the state. That means we have to raise the rest of the resources, and that is not a sustainable strategy. And for me, as a provider, I know I speak for other providers, this is a crisis moment. We need better public-private partnership to really address this issue as quickly as we can, as fast as we can, to mitigate this issue immediately. Because if we don't, we're talking about lives of our young people, about people who are single adults, who are families who are seeking services and support. So I urge our elected officials, please, 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 make sure this bill passes and degree of urgency that we all are expecting and rightfully deserve. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you. Next would be Molly.
Step in the podium. It's already started poorly. I'm Molly Jolm. I'm the Executive Director of Listening House, which is a daytime resource center for people experiencing homelessness, isolation, and loneliness. When those overnight shelters close, there are only a few of us who are open during the day. We want a vibrant area. Cities, all of us do, through greater Minnesota and here, and it's not either or. It is not social services or a vibrant community. They have to work hand in hand. There's a lot of urgency. We are seeing new people every day, new faces. Last year alone, we saw 3,000 unique users of our service, and we are small, but 3,000 is a lot, and it's only growing. We need it now. It's a crisis. There needs to be more spaces throughout the entire state. When rural Minnesota does what better, we do better here. People shouldn't have to come to the city to charge their phone and be able to sit down somewhere or take a shower. So please pass this. Thank you for all being here, and thank you for the support. And I'm gonna, pass it off to Representative Ryer. You were already on top.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Liz Ryer from House District 52A, representing Eagan and Burnsville. We've been doing a great deal of important work this session. Moving forward with legislation to address homelessness is one of my top priorities, and now we have the chance to invest in our communities to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. It's time to pass House File 444. The Pathway Home Act, a bill that builds on the powerful work we did in the Preventing Homelessness Division over the past 2 years. Homelessness can happen to anyone. It happened to me as a result of domestic violence. Without the shelter and services my baby son and I received from Women's Advocates Shelter, Ramsey County, and the state of Minnesota, I am sure I would not be standing before you here today. But homelessness is so much more common in our Black and brown communities because of consistent underinvestment and structural racism. Indigenous people are 30 times as likely, and Black people 12 times as likely than white people to be homeless. Due to lack of safe options, many are unsheltered. Hundreds of young people, particularly LGBTQIA youth, do not have a permanent home. The Pathway Home Act provides a variety of solutions, including funding for new shelter space and the services that bring them to life, additional funding for the Successful Homeless Youth Act and for transitional housing, establishment of a chosen family program, and reliable funding to support the Homeless Management Information System. We need to fund the Pathway Home and other legislation that addresses homelessness. It's an act of compassion, of justice, of humanity. It's a cost-effective step that reduces the need for more expensive and ongoing programming, but more importantly than that, it's our way to address the ongoing trauma that far too many people are experiencing. When tragedies occur, we often say, this is not who we are. But if we fail to make budget choices that take care of people who are suffering, we are showing exactly who we are. Let's make the moral choice, the just choice, and pass House File 444 to fund the Pathway Home. And now I will turn it over to Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Representative Ryer, and thank you from the bottom of my heart to everyone who is here, those who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, those who take care of people, those who advocate. You're building a movement, and your presence here in the Capitol is so crucial, so thank you. And before I forget, I want to make sure we introduce all of our colleagues, unless you were planning to do that.
Did you go ahead?
So we've heard from Representative Ryer, we're going to hear from Representative Keeler in a moment, Representative Kozlowski, Representative Fisher, Chair of Health and Human Services, Representative Noor. I thought I saw Representative Frazier over there somewhere, so he's in orbit. My colleague, Senator Kupek, Representative Howard, who chairs the Housing and Homelessness, or Housing. Representative Berg is here. Anyone else? Who am I missing? All right, thank you all.
Councilmember.
Councilmember Jason Chavez is here. Thank you for being here. Homelessness is a human tragedy. It is a stain on Minnesota. It is the culmination of the failure of so many things in our state. Try to imagine the circumstance of not having a house or an apartment, a bed of your own, a bathroom, a kitchen, a place to live. What will have happened in your life to create that situation? Loss of everything that provides security and stability, those things you hold most dear. Maybe you have a health issue, an addiction, or mental health condition with no real access to affordable, effective care. Maybe someone or someone you love has lost everything because of a catastrophic illness. Maybe your partner is violent and you've relied on them for money and housing. Maybe you are an LGBTQ teenager who was rejected by their family for religious reasons, or the level of abuse and harm from your family, your own parents, was a danger to your safety and sanity. These things happen every day in people's lives in Minnesota. But we are the wealthiest state in the wealthiest country at a time in which we have created the most resources in human history. While at the same time, since the dawn of the industrial and then information age, we've seen that wealth concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Homelessness is not something that exists in isolation. It is a failure of those structures I described before. But we need to make sure that we can deliver the value, the crucial things that people need. Affordable transportation, access to healthcare, nutritious food, a decent education, job training, affordable childcare, and secure retirement. The effort we're talking about today is simply to respond to the emergency of homelessness that exists in our state and get people indoors, a bed to sleep in, food, care, and connection, so that they can be safe and secure, and ideally restore those things that would allow them to move on to better and more long-sustained security. And the cost of not solving homelessness is so much higher in all the ways you can well imagine. Our healthcare system, our criminal justice system, and on. But the opportunity that is lost is even greater when people can't live and be their best selves and bring all of their talent, creativity, when they can't fully participate in our economy as workers and consumers. So this bill was already described by Representative Ryer, so I won't go on to describe it, other than to say that many of the people that we're talking about, we don't see every day out on corners or on the street. They're in places where we don't see them. Young people in particular, as Beth Holger described earlier, are in beds they shouldn't be in and being taken advantage of by people who should be in no position to take advantage of them. And the reason we're bringing this bill forward at this time is so that we can get these resources pulled together and out the door to help as many people as possible so that another winter like the one we are in Evansville does not go by with thousands of encampments on the streets or thousands of folks in encampments on the streets and on. Organizations need to know that these resources are available, they're being deployed, so they can plan, they can ramp up, they can stand up, they can hire folks, so we can be ready to respond to this crisis. It now gives me no small amount of pleasure to introduce the amazing champion and my partner on this bill in the House, Representative Keeler.
Hello. I've been trying not to cry this whole time because this is actually really emotional. I want to let all of you know this is the power of what happens when you come and you share your voices with us. We heard you. Chair Gomez and I swear after every committee would leave and spend time processing what we learned, wiping away tears and thinking like, how did we get here? We can talk about all the things on how we got here. As an Indigenous queer woman, every table I sit at will tell you that people who look like me struggle at much higher rates. But I decided that we need to come forward with a solution. And so what we did is we listened. We listened to the pieces and components that mattered the most to you. We built a path that hopefully other people can add their stones onto. We have chairs here that sit at tables that is all about preventing homelessness. This is not an end-all bill. I want to be very clear about this. This is not designed to have a one-snap end homelessness. This is designed to inspire all of you to go back to the tables and the spaces that you sit at to know that you have a role to play in ending homelessness. Whether it's access to healthcare, access to food, access to good education, transportation needs, the list goes on and on. So this is only the start of what we hope we all continue to do together. It is an investment in our future generations. As an Indigenous woman, we believe that the work that we do impacts 7 generations. People we will never even know. Your pain we have turned into purpose. Your stories, we have heard you. This is a good day in Minnesota. Bringing all of these people, I've been in this room a couple times and I have never seen it look this beautiful. I can tell you that. This is what advocacy looks like. I'm looking at people who aren't even old enough to vote yet. This is your future. This is what happens when you show up and you tell us your story. We listen to you. We hear you. We're here to do better for you. So thank you for everybody who's been on this journey with us. Thank you for taking the bravery and the courage to share your stories. We know that we've heard stories of individuals who've moved on to the spirit world because we didn't move fast enough. Shelter saves lives. That's absolutely what we're here to do, and I couldn't be more proud to do it with this team. Ilame, we're in that here. We can move over for questions if you all have some. Thank you.
I have one. Just, if you could, talk about the urgency piece, and I was a bit late, so I'm sorry. What has happened that has sort of created this sense of urgency, and anyone can take it, but are there things that are at work making it worse?
I don't think it's getting anywhere. I think it's been bad for a really long time. I think the urgency in the bill, particularly, and why we're moving it is because we know that when we do work in this world, we're always moving at kind of that 6-month cycle. This bill is unique in the fact that it's bringing shelter and services together. So working with our state agencies, making sure that we can build a robust RFP system, that we can get the job descriptions out, that we can be ready to hit the ground running. If we wait until the end of session, hit the ground running is November, and we know what happens in November. We have really, really horrible winters, and we want people to be safe in warm places by that time. That's why the sense of urgency is happening at this point in session. Yeah?
And if I could encourage a provider to step forward, what it would mean to have an RFP to respond to towards the end of summer in the fall versus the usual cycle, December and later, in terms of workforce and facilities, et cetera.
Sure. So as provider, I think the sort of timing is very important to us in 2 areas. One is planning for community members to receive services in an appropriate manner that allows us to really staff up. Then there's all issues of staffing issues, right? We need to hire people, pay our staff a fair wage. So knowing that if we're gonna receive resources in advance prior to a particular timeline, then we can pre-plan and figure out what we need to do in terms of actually delivering services, able to hire people in a timely manner as opposed to waiting last minute. then it creates a major gap between services delivered now till later on. So it's about continuity.
Thank you.
Wondering if one of the authors could talk about a timeline when you're hoping to get this passed and what the rollout will look like once it is passed.
I mean, now, right? We're trying to get, we in the House, it actually just passed through Ways and Means, so we're just waiting for it to be on the floor. If you want to give an update of where we are in the Senate.
So, same. So, this is admittedly a big lift and a big ask. We're asking for $200-some million to go out ahead of the regular budget cycle. And we're trying to, demonstrate the urgency of now for those practical reasons, as well as, the crisis that homelessness and it has been bad all along, but the numbers have become worse. So really signaling that this is a priority. It's an urgent need. It's occurring right now, and we need to make sure that, to Michael Gore's points, we can stand up services, respond to the population in crisis in a timely basis, so we don't repeat the kind of winter that we're in the midst of right now, and also send that important signal. This is important. This is a priority, and this is foundational to everything else we do as a state. When we're not taking care of those who are most in need, then we're signaling that is not a priority, and those are not our values.
What's the next step after shelter? What about people that might not be eligible to get housing in certain places because they don't have a ton of money and that's why they're in shelter? What's the next step after shelter?
I was just gonna say, if you all don't know that our next generation is here to challenge us and uplift us and questions like that, absolutely. I'm gonna hand that over to Chair Howard.
My name is Mike Howard. I'm the chair of our housing committee. And what's your name?
Leah.
Leah? That's a great question. Leah?
Leah.
Very good question. And as Representative Keeler mentioned, this bill is about saving lives, and it's a pathway home. And in some sense, when you're kind of at rock bottom, that first step you take is the most important. That's what this bill is all about. But we need to make transformational investments in housing across the spectrum, because as you mentioned, the cost of housing is so expensive. Right now, there are more than 200,000 Minnesotans that are paying more than 50% of all of their income in housing. And so if you're spending over half of your income in housing, you're kind of one bad break of being right back in that bad position again. One of the big ways that we're looking, and we actually have this bill up today, called the Bring It Home Bill, which would create a housing voucher for every Minnesotan that is a lower middle income Minnesotan, so that they would not pay more than 30% of their income in housing. And if we could do that, and it costs a lot of money, but those kinds of investments to just literally help people afford their housing, and then build a lot more homes at incomes that we can provide, that's kind of the secret sauce. Services to help people when they in that crisis point, make sure there's investments to help people afford their housing and to build a lot more housing. It's a really good question.
I got a question for you
Oh,
guys.
hang on one second. I'm just gonna add, in this bill alone, we have a component around transitional housing. So we know that once you're out of shelter, there is a 36-month time frame. Because many people, I believe, are like me. I was just never taught the fiscal, behind the scenes maneuvering about how to go to a bank to get a home loan, like all of these things, right? Like I just didn't know that. Generations before me didn't know that. And so in this bill, we have added the transitional housing piece, so that is kind of the what's after shelter, but before being in your own homes. So we're trying to bridge it all together.
We have time for one more question.
How are you guys going to go about introducing this into the Black and brown communities? Because we aren't as trusting as most people would assume, because more than likely somebody walks into our community like, hey, we got money for you guys to do better, but more than likely they're going to be a little skeptical. So how are you guys go about introducing it?
Right. I'll just ask any providers to come forward. A big part of this is street outreach. Maybe Beth Holger can talk about the street outreach component, the drop-in centers, the kind of leadership and the kind of direct services we have come from communities of color, whether those are Native or Black and, Black, brown communities, LGBTQ people. People need to go and be in community that they already know. That is so fundamental, that is so key. It's not, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It's community-based, connective, competent, capable services. Beth, do you want to?
Oh, sure. Sure, thank you, Senator. So thank you, Kavante, for that amazing question. It's very real. And so what happens with these funds is they would go through what's called a request for proposals. So the government would put out kind of like an announcement saying these funds are available, and then different community-based nonprofits who are grounded in Black and brown communities, North Minneapolis is one of them, for example, can apply for the funds. And then the staff within those organizations are the ones to go out and build up those relationships with the community that they're already a part of and in. So that's the hope. It's not directly government workers going out and building up the connections, but they're granting it to community-based organizations that already have those relationships and can build up those relationships, if that makes sense.
Can I
Really
ask you,
good question.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick logistical question back to your urgency piece and not having it be in the regular part of the budget like now? How likely is that to actually happen legislatively, so this is here, it can't wait till later to get funded? Do you know what I'm asking? Is it possible, and how hard is it to get money before?
So, okay, just to clarify, we're moving the bill early so that the bill is passed and in law. That's our intention, so that people can maneuver forward with what they want to do. This is still in the same budget line item. We're just moving it earlier so this money is allocated. The state agency knows that it's coming so that we can better plan. If we wait until May to even pass it, then we add that. So the money is still moving in the same FY as every other bill. We're just maneuvering it faster so we can plan accordingly to make this actually work and move rather than just be a theory and process.
And the leaders, Portman and Dietzig, both are on board with this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just wanted to build off what Representative Keeler was saying in your question about culturally responsive shelter. I think it's really important to know that there are 18 projects across the state that are ready to go, or they need investment, they want to expand, they want to deepen resources, they want to deepen services, but the resources aren't there. We also have shelters that are specific to the LGBTQ population, ready to go, 21 projects across the state. So, I mean, we've gathered up all this information about the shelter, creating those spaces to bring people inside before another cold snap. But we need a pathway home. We need these resources to make that possible.
All right, thanks everyone.
Yay.